I need to keep communicating in ways that are psychoactive for myself. I need to create psychoactive communication. All communication is psychoactive. And the psychoactivity of my situation is not at the place that I feel is ideal for me. So creating this kind of psychoactive communication is a way to overcome that. I need to keep learning, just keep learning, keep communicating. I need to continue with that course on social enterprise and learn how to create one. And I created a new word, mathematical thinking. It's a play on mathematical thinking. And MAP is a term that I use for myself that stands for meaning, action, potential, or the action potential that comes from moving in this sphere and this domain of meaning and seeing meaning and unfolding meaning for one's own understanding for oneself. And this is a different dimension than operating based on the programs of thought that we've been conditioned with over time. And so mathematical thinking is just thinking in a way, or seeing and moving in a way and acting in a way that one gets to learn these gestures and innate capacities in the nervous system through one's daily life. So it's mathematical thinking and seeing, and then I changed the word even a little bit more and changed it to mathemagical thinking, because this domain is a domain of magic, but it's not really magic. It only seems like magic when we don't understand how our nervous system really works. Most of us have been hypnotized by our conditioning, and the thinking that is going on in our brain isn't really thinking at all. It's just tape loops on repeat, and those lead to our sleepwalking through life. So mathematical thinking is not sleepwalking, but moving through understanding, meaning making, seeing connections, synchronicity, creating synchronicity, not just seeing synchronicity, but seeing how one can create that, which is part of the creative process. Can we learn mathemagics or mathematics? Can we think back to when we were confused and what we did? Can we think about how we were thinking about a certain thing or approaching a certain situation, and not just retract in fear and say, oh, it's okay, you have a mental illness, but actually respecting one's capacity to learn in a new way, in a mathematical and mathemagical way? And can we be interested in this new way that the brain is learning and not just write it off as being afraid of one's own capacities? Can we move beyond good and bad and actually be interested in how the brain is now learning in new ways, learning in the moment, in daily life, not just having the conditioned thoughts running around and then not learning at all? What were you learning in MAP, in that domain, that dimension of meaning, action, potential? What were the meanings that you were seeing, and what were the potentials of action, or in what ways did they move you? Not just harvesting, but learning about how we were learning. And we must learn for ourselves. Nobody can help us learn this for us. Can we pay attention to map thinking, map perception? A map perception, in a way, is a perception that changes the map of the brain. It changes the way we map the world. It's something new. It's something outside our conditioning. I feel that knowing something by heart has nothing to do with remembering. It's actually about being in touch with the moment and knowing something in the moment because the heart tells us. And I also feel like mania is a major rewiring of the brain that has long-term effects. Unfortunately, that rewiring is poisoned by medications usually, but It can actually be an experience of an altered state that has long-term beneficial effects on the brain. I'm reading the book Stealing Fire by Jamie Wheel and Stephen Kotler, and it's really good actually now that I've gotten past the first chapter about Navy SEALs. And they talk about how even just short altered state experiences can have long-term beneficial effects. And if one extrapolates that to something like a mania, then to me it seems like it can actually have long-term beneficial effects, but it's never seen that way because it's just seen as a mental illness. But I see it as having long-term beneficial effects on my life. It's changed my whole life. And I was thinking about where I got confused in my first state of map consciousness. And I got really confused and fearful after I made the fly video. It seems like I lost my ability to respond creatively. I began to react, to run, to retract and go down old neural tracks. And I stopped learning. I stopped learning because I was living in fear. And thinking is a lot slower than insight. And so I wonder why we're so interested in the thinking process when insight happens in a flash and gives a lot more information and insight and meaning than the thinking process. Insight can initiate a thinking process, but usually our thinking process is from our thinking process. So it's very limited. Mania as there's something you really need to understand about your nervous system. It synchronizes your whole life with your own understanding. And in mania, that understanding is very fluid and dynamic, and the meaning making changes moment to moment. So it feels quite chaotic because it's not tethered to a center called the me. Whatever meaning is being made or whatever is being seen or being understood in the moment is what is, without reference to the me. It is a hyper state of learning that is attempting to facilitate our understanding of ourselves. And I was thinking of mania in terms of long-acting fight or flight. And it's usually from trauma. And I've heard it said that it's fight, flight, flee, or freeze. And I thought of a fifth term when it comes to so-called mania. The fifth term is actually free. What it really is, what all those 4 F's are, fight, flight, freeze, or flee, are all attempts for one to free oneself from that particular situation or scenario. So in mania, if one is in an extended fight or flight, a hyper fight or flight, one will keep fighting and fleeing until one is actually free. And since the trauma or the situation seems everywhere, and it is, because this whole world is actually resonating in the field of trauma. There's so much that is re-traumatizing just walking down the street. So one keeps going until one is free, and one fights, one flights, one freezes, one flees. And when we interact with others in that state, we're trying to free them in some way, even if we don't think about it that way. And we no longer feel like we are a me. We feel like we are a free. And it's moving from the trauma domain to the subtle domain. And then I wrote down, be your best self or you are in danger. I don't know if that's a message to myself, but maybe it is. Maybe I have to really step up my game in a way and pretend that I'm okay around the people that know me, because otherwise they'll think that I'm not doing well. And they'll think I'm not doing well because of my supposed mental illness, when really if I'm not doing well, it's because of the situation. So in so-called mania, often we are our best selves, and that keeps us out of the danger of the trauma. And we can kind of move as superhumans trying to resolve a lot of that trauma. We see the trauma, but at times we can resolve some of it. And in a way, that's why we're stronger and more perceptive, because we are our best selves, and that's what keeps us away from the danger, even though we sense everything as dangerous. Not everything, but a lot of it feels dangerous, but we feel almost invincible to move through it. And an example of that is people who think they can fly, they feel invincible. So we really do feel invincible. And in a way, a person would need to feel that strong and invincible to take on and tackle some of the things that we do attempt to resolve when we're in those states. And we're kind of in a constant flow, because flow is what will save us from danger, because we don't have time to think about the me. It's just seeing danger and acting. But that's sometimes how we flow right into the hands of psychiatry, because we run away from the danger. After we lose our sense of invincibility, we feel very vulnerable. And then that's part of the mechanism, though, in a way. That's part of it, how we go into this hyper strong and perceptive best self state. We're moving around in this world of trauma and also working to resolve things. We're sharing, we're helping, we're being generous, kind, altruistic in the moment. And then that wears out. And when it does, we're basically running for our lives. It's kind of like being on a mission to save somebody from a certain situation, and then when we realize we can't do anymore, we just run for our lives. And when we do that, we run right back into psychiatry. So we're flowing in the field of trauma and danger, able to resolve things, and then it eventually builds up and we're kind of crushed by it, and then we run into the help. And this is kind of similar to war in a way. People are trained to be these soldiers, and they go out and they fight the battle they need to fight. And when they come back, they're traumatized, and a lot of them just end up on psych meds or something like that. So as someone who goes into so-called mania, it feels like almost fighting a battle here in one's own life, the battle for one's life to escape this traumatic life that we've inherited as normal. And when we can't escape that, then we're kind of medicated into being able to still live in it. So then the sixth F would be going from free to being flat. A lot of people get flat affect on medication, just numbed out. So we're in this state where we are trying to get free, fight, flight, freeze, or flee, and then we go to flat once we are captured by psychiatry. And then we don't try to fight or flee or fight or freeze, we just are flat. I have major cramps, and I took an naproxen today because I'm really not interested in spending the whole day in the bathroom when I haven't really had very much time and space to myself. But it hasn't really kicked in yet. And before, I was talking about the study that I read about. Do ambitious and exploratory behaviors drive creativity in bipolar disorder?